It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans, and I will be your host this morning. Well, we've had a heck of a week, a tail to last week, and a heck of a weekend. Folks, the stuff that's coming out is just stunning to me. And when I see how America is responding, or not responding in many cases, I'm stunned by it. This morning we're gonna try to cover some ground about a couple of issues, not the least of which is this Bundy issue. And I want to talk to you a little bit about truth. Because, well, there's a couple of aspects of it. Some of it media-oriented, some of it patriot-oriented, some of it Bundy-oriented. And we're going to talk about it. The media is misrepresenting the truth. Bundy is a guy who says what he says and doesn't think twice about whether or not it's going to be offensive to someone else. In fact, I don't think he realizes it is offensive, and in many cases it shouldn't be. But the truth is that many Americans are offended by it, and more importantly, I think one aspect of this is that I see a lot of individuals who... I got a lot of hate mail after Friday's show, and I think from a lot of people who actually didn't listen to the segment, because I played the actual comments that he made. Of course, he made some others since then. All right, the second topic we're going to cover is climate change hoax and how it's been exposed by one of the primary authors, who actually has come right out and said, he's the lead author there, and he says that the entire report, including the summary, was rewritten for political reasons. You know, this is the holy grail for the climate changers. And they can't wait to dig into your pocket as a result of it. So we're going to expose what's going on with that, because the Harvard professor who actually was the primary author of all of the climate information that's going on for the IPCC is actually coming out and saying, we were told what to write. And ladies and gentlemen, I got to tell you, commissioned science is not science. It's artwork. And there's a big difference. One is an interpretation. The other are facts. And science is fact, not someone's artist rendering of what climate change may look like. Our third topic, the IRS has actually activated the enemies list. Now, you know, we've talked before about the fact that they're building an enemies list, and that's bad enough. But they've not only built the enemies list, now they've actually activated it. And I got to wonder why no one is talking about, and the truth is that everyone's silent about the IRS stripping the Patrick Henry Center for Individual Liberty of their tax-exempt status because of some statements they made against the Clintons. Wow. So if you want to see how free speech is being silenced by the IRS, and they have actually taken an enemies list but chosen an enemy from it and slew them, you're going to see it here. Our fourth topic. There are some TeaParty groups that have some explaining to do. The reason I say that is because there are some reports out there about how they're spending money. And when I see a group that spends 80% or 90% of the money on more fundraising and administrative costs, they have some explaining to do. Now, this should not be taken as a message that all Tea Parties and all the Tea Party groups out there are not doing their job. But there are a couple that are going to be named in this discussion. And I recently received a letter from Tea Party Patriots, and we're going to talk about that as well. All right, let's get into our first topic, because this Bundy thing has created an enormous amount of angst amongst not only patriots, but, of course, the politicians are now, they're trying to bend with whatever way the wind is blowing. And I put a comment out there on Friday that Cliven Bundy will be known heretofore as Al, because he's put his foot in his mouth. Some people took umbrage with that. In fact, I got some email about it, some hate mail, actually. And I got to tell you, it's bad enough that the media is unwilling to shed a realistic light on what we see going on. But I want to talk about truth for a moment, because part of truth is recognizing and using your critical thinking skills to recognize that, just because we believe in a movement that requires the federal government to step back from its overreach doesn't mean that we have to support every person that is participating in it. And I don't unsupport Cliven Bundy, but here's my problem with it, and it was what my problem was all along. The mainstream media and the Ministry of Propaganda are using this as an opportunity to discredit all of us. And that was exactly what the point was. I think I got some comments from some folks that apparently didn't even listen to the audio segment. I got some email from people that said to me, you have no right to call him that. Well, he's not a racist. Well, with all due respect, I played the entire segment during the audio. During that, I played the entire audio clip of them taking him out of context during the segment. So apparently all those people who sent me an email weren't or didn't even watch the segment. They just read the headline and then made a determination. I included one from a member of his security team who happens to be black. He's from Missouri. And he said, I don't really care what Cliven Bundy said. I didn't take it that way, and I'm staying here to support and defend the family. The problem that we have is that we have to be careful that we do not fall into the same trap as the ideologues on the left. What do I mean by that? Well, our job is to expose truth to people who are coming awake in vast droves. My job is not to side with you if you think one way or another. My job is not to agree with whatever way the wind blows. I had people who accused me of attempting to do that and siding with the mainstream media. In fact, I had one person who actually accused me of doing it for ratings. Ratings? What ratings? I mean, you got to be kidding me, right? Really? Ratings? You mean ratings for a program that plays on a radio station in the middle of the Ozarks and YouTube videos that YouTube blocks so that I can't get more than a couple of hundred views at best per episode. The Bundy one got a couple thousand. That's a sea change. You got to be kidding me. Ratings? What ratings? This isn't some mainstream media news program where I've got to worry about what the audience thinks. And frankly, if the audience doesn't agree with me, there's plenty of other channels and plenty of other places and plenty of other people that they can listen. I was stunned by that. And in fact, I'm more than stunned by that. I'm angered by that because that calls my integrity into question. And nobody has the right to do that. Number one, this is an opinion program, and it's generally mine. Number two, it's an educational opinion program, which means that my job is to bring to you the news that the mainstream media either is filled with disinformation from them in an attempt to mislead you, and all I do is throw out an opposing viewpoint and say, hey, maybe you should look at it from this perspective. But do your own homework, do your own due diligence, make sure that you have evaluated all the information. Don't take my word for things. Take your own word for things. Don't parrot my opinions. They are only my opinion. How many times have you, the routine listeners, heard me say that? 1,000 times. The truth is, ratings and opinion of the listenership is not what this is about. If that was what this was about, I would have stopped doing this a long time ago. And I'm disturbed by the fact that there are people who will say it doesn't matter that he's inarticulate. No, it doesn't matter that he's inarticulate. He's entitled to say anything he wants to say. He's entitled through his First Amendment right to free speech and free thought to think and speak how he wants. However, he should have, and those people around him, those people who have jumped on this and that were out there, should have been encouraging him and or finding for him a spokesperson. He went on CNN the other day and added to it. You see, he doesn't, since he knows that he's not a media spokesman, and he doesn't understand the traps that are being laid for him by the progressive media in a specific and willful, intentional purpose of catching him in something that they can use to dissuade the public from believing or supporting him. Worse yet, it is taking the entire Patriot movement and casting everyone who did support him as having similar opinions. And that's wrong. I give you the gentleman who was part of a security team from Missouri who was black. He said, I'm a member of the security team. I don't care what he said. This is not about him. It's about the BLM and federal overreach. You see, here's the problem. He's drawn off the power. He's emptied the sails of wind for literally a ton of us who have been out there fighting this battle for a very long time. And I resent that. I resent being cast as something I'm not, a racist. Or I resent being by the media, but I resent being cast that way because I'm in support of what he's been doing. What he's been doing is saying, I'm going to stand up against the federal government. Period. End of argument. But the truth is, just because, if I cannot speak the truth about my thoughts about the Bundy issue and his daily press conferences, if I can't use honesty and use critical thinking to decipher whether or not he's made a mistake that's costing all of us something, then and I'm castigated by a group of viewers who disagree with that, then I've got to ask, are you doing the same exact thing? Are you? Someone actually sent me an email and said I was a sunshine patriot. I don't think they used that phrase, but that was the general consensus. Fair weather friend, something along those lines. I got to tell you something. If that is the opinion that this audience has, after having listened and heard these programs for as long as I've been doing them, at my cost and expense, I don't get paid for this, folks. You know, I pay all the bills, in fact. If that's what people believe, then apparently you've never either believed a word I've said, or you are so ideologically wrapped up in the issue that the minute someone presents a critical thought, your critical thinking skills evaporate. And that's not good. The truth of the matter is, I was right about what the MSM would do. If anyone listened to Bill O'Reilly, I believe it was Thursday, after he made the comments, he roundly trounced not only the entire issue, but everyone who supported him. And that guy has a bigger audience than all of the rest of the mainstream ministry of propaganda combined. He's got a bigger audience than anybody on CNN, than anybody on NBC, anybody on NBC, CBS, ABC. The number one audio or commentator in the nation threw all of us under the bus and discredited the entire movement based on his statements. The truth is, Bundy either needs to be quiet or he needs to obtain for himself a spokesperson who will do his talking for him, because clearly he is not capable of determining where the pitfalls lie. I'm not a national person. I can say what I want. And the reason I can is because I don't really care if the media were to try to castigate me or throw me under the bus. The truth is, I'll stop doing this program tomorrow morning. Couldn't care less. In fact, it would be a relief. But I don't speak for the tens of thousands of people who supported and showed up and donated money. The media is still, in fact, there's articles all over the place. I posted one up this morning from The Guardian where they're still using it. And by the way, don't just because The Guardian came out and ran the Snowden stuff, make no mistake about it, The Guardian is an ultra-liberal newspaper. It always has been. The Wire has got entire segments dedicated to it. A list of Cliven Bundy supporters, now that we know he's a pro-slavery racist. What kind of a headline is that? Ladies and gentlemen, here's what it comes down to. You know, we have to be willing, and I'm going to talk about this in our fourth segment, where we talk about some TeaParty members have some explaining to do about donations and their spending. We have to be willing to look at ourselves realistically and honestly. And if we're unwilling to do that, then really are we vastly different from those that we purport to disagree with? Truth is truth. It's not changed by your opinion or someone else's. The truth is, Al Bundy, or Cliven Bundy, needs to stop talking. Period. End of statement. He needs a spokesperson. He needs someone to speak on his behalf. You can disagree with that, but that doesn't make everything else I say wrong. You can disagree with whether or not he should be able to say what he wants to say. He should. But when he says things like that harm all of us and cast all of us and put the mainstream media, who is educating the rest of America, and sets us back and puts tens of thousands back to sleep, maybe millions, I'm incensed. And if you don't like that, there's plenty of other places out there where you can go and you can get your education and your information. It's that simple. It's the basic principle of capitalism and freedom and liberty. No one has to listen to this program. That's one of the reasons why, quite frankly, this program is not popular, because I will not stand here and agree and acquiesce to what everything else is. So like it or not, I took umbrage with what Cliven Bundy said. And I will continue to take umbrage with the fact that he has cast all of us in a negative light. And he's cast our movement and the fact that this was about the BLM, not about a guy named Cliven. The truth of the matter is, everything that happened out there to that family was wrong. And nothing he says will change that. The only difference is, will America now stand up and demand answers, or will they turn away? And if his words and if his statements destroy the value of millions of Americans who looked upon this and said, yeah, something's wrong with that picture. And they say, something seemed to be wrong there, but maybe it's really him after all. Then it's cost us massive forward movement. And the truth is, I've worked long and hard, taken an enormous amount of risk, and so have many, many others, all of you included, to educate and inform those people within our circle of influence. And if we lose ground as a result of that, that's not good. It's amazing to me how fast the media jumped all over this. It was like they actually were waiting. The headlines were almost pre-written. Even Heller, who was, staunchly supporting the issue, now says that he completely disagrees with Bundy's appalling and racist statements and condemns them in the most strenuous way. He had an advocate in Heller, senator from Nevada. All right, that's my thoughts on it. Like it or not. You're listening to America's Voice now. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the climate change hoax that is exposed by its primary author, who's clearly stating emphatically that this is not a serious report and that it's been rewritten to as commissioned art, not science. If that's what we're relying upon, ladies and gentlemen, to change the entire economy of the world, stunning. You're listening to America's Voice Now. Find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org. You can email me directly with your comments at mike@americasvoicenow.org. We'll be right back. Right. We're back. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans, and I am the host here. We're in our second segment this morning, and essentially we're covering, in this segment, the issue of climate change and the hoax that's being perpetrated not just on the United States, but on the entire world. What bothers me about this article, and we're going to go over it, is that it's out on Breitbart, and yet the Ministry of Propaganda, a.k.a. the mainstream media, is not reporting on a bombshell by the lead author, a Harvard professor, no less. I mean, this guy, he's a lefty, right? Harvard University. He published an open letter on Friday, and he's basically exposing the hoax that is climate change. Let's understand what he's saying. He states that the UN climate report, which is created by the IPCC, which is the founding organization and the document that, for all intents and purposes, this is the go-to document that all of the climate change enablers utilize so that they can basically reach into your pocket, strangle industry, change the nature of everything about our infrastructure in terms of, this is the document that changes whether or not we have less coal plants. This is what the EPA is relying upon to take over water, to shut down coal-fired plants when we have nothing to replace them, to start up these natural gas-fired plants when the price of natural gas, as we now know from this past winter, is all over the map, right? Fluctuates all over the place. I mean, I read an article the other day. People were getting $1,300 electric bills. $1,300 because the electric company used natural gas, which went up to $5 a gallon. Propane, natural gas. The point is simply this. The world uses these climate reports as their Bible in the religion of climate change. And he's basically stating that it's been written as a commissioned piece of art, and it is not science. He says that basically, he claims the intervention in this, in which he was told basically what well, first of all, just so you understand, what happens is the report itself is written, and then there is a summary that's written, and that is typically what's held up by your politicals around the world who say, aha, here's the guts of the report. And the summary is completely different. In fact, it openly contradicts some things in the actual report itself. The summary wasn't merely, ginned up, if you want to use the political hot buzzword of the day, to fool the gullible, but it actually directly contradicts the report itself in a number of specific key areas, and they're important key functions. The media reports of the summary have been stating that global warming is going to cause more war. If you haven't been watching that, to me, that's just utterly stunning. Here we are saying that global warming causes war. Show me any way that you can draw that correlation. What the report actually states, that's what the summary says. What the report actually states is that there's absolutely no reason to believe whatsoever that climate change has much to do with violent conflict. In fact, the only thing that between climate change and violent conflict, the only connection is that most nations who have poor environmental records have sustained physical violent conflict. How did you draw climate change will cause war from that? Professor Richard Toll of Sussex University, he is one of the lead contributors. He refused to sign on to the final product because, quote, he was uncomfortable with the hysteria in the report summary. In the UK Daily Mail, they had there's an online letter published by Robert Stavins in which he alleges that three quarters, ladies and gentlemen, we're not talking about, a couple of sentences that might have gotten mixed up here. When 3/4 of the original document were deleted or revised after a late night meeting in which there were only a couple of scientists there surrounded by this vast number of people who were political people who all of them benefit from a negative finding about climate change. Stunning, isn't it? Quote, Professor Stavins claimed the intervention amounted to a serious conflict of interest between scientists and governments. His revelation is significant because it's rare for climate change experts to publicly question the process behind the compilation of reports on the subject. Professor Stavins says the government officials in Berlin fought to make big changes in the full report summary for policymakers. This is the condensed version usually cited by the world's media and the politicians. He said their goal was to protect their, quote, negotiating stances at upcoming talks over a new greenhouse gas reduction treaty. Stavins told the Mail on Sunday that he had been especially concerned by what happened at a special contact group. He was only one of 2 scientists present, and they were surrounded by 45 to 50 government officials. He said almost all of them made it clear that, quote, any text that was considered inconsistent with their interests and positions in multilateral negotiations was treated as unacceptable, end quote. Ladies and gentlemen, if that's the way we're going to now use science as a weapon in politics, Stavins goes on to say the following. Many of the officials were climate change negotiators, and they were trying to work on this new treaty that's supposed to replace Kyoto. This created an irreconcilable conflict of interest. It has got to the point, says Stavins, where it would be reasonable to call the document a summary by policymakers, not a summary for policymakers. And it certainly affects the credibility of the IPCC. The process ought to be reformed. Folks, let me help you understand the impact of what this means. Because these climate change documents are the self-same ones that the EPA is utilizing to expand their Clean Water Act legislation to gain control of all water in the United States. The same one that they're using under the Clean Air Act to shut down all of the coal-fired plants across the country. The same one that they're using to shut down nuclear plants across the country, accusing them of safety and pollution and blah, 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 blah. The same one that they are using to create new rules and regulations that make it virtually impossible to build any new kind of electricity generating power plant, even of natural gas, which obviously burns a whole lot cleaner than coal. Here's the problem. There is no realistic alternative solution to fossil fuel right now. And this is the equivalent of quitting a job without having another job in the worst economy that's been experienced by the country since the Great Depression. You don't do that. Why? Well, because until we have an alternative solution that gives us a replacement of equal or greater equivalent than coal, we don't do anything. You don't sell your car and not have the money to buy another car, because then you can't even afford to go to work to go and buy another car. You can't get to work if you don't have the vehicle. You don't quit your job when you don't have another job. The article goes on to say that science has been bludgeoned into submission with a hockey stick graph long ago. The Church of Global Warming is now pure politics. Climate change hysteria provides a perfect excuse for what? Higher taxes and greater regulation, combined with a pseudo-religious cause around which left-wingers can rally with a sense of supreme righteousness. They even feel confident in trying to outlaw dissent, because if you try to debate the latest climate change fatwa, you're threatening the very survival of the earth itself. Surely, every single one of their doomsday predictions has been wrong thus far, but we can't take the chance they'll be wrong with the next 20 predictions, so shut up and pay up. This United Nations report is a purely political document that has only a tangential connection to real science. It's a desperate bid for government to stay relevant as the number of questions it cannot answer keeps growing. If you do take the time to read the full report, not just the politically doctored summary, you'll find the thing is absolutely riddled with pure speculation. Using words like might, could, or may happen over the things that may or could or might happen over the coming century, or may not. Obviously, the hucksters who use climate hysteria to screw over their taxpayers didn't think that was good enough. So instead, for the summary, they wrote some science fiction instead. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the truth about what's going on with climate change. Climate Gate, the number of fraudulent scams that have been perpetrated on these on behalf of the climate change religion, and it is a religion. All of it is designed to do one thing, and only one thing, and that is to essentially give government the argument it needs to reach into your pocket, steal money from you, and ultimately have even greater control. Ladies and gentlemen, please tell me you cannot conceive of a federal government with any more control than it already has. Already, everything that the federal government does is outside the constitutional boundaries with some very, very limited exceptions. And those limited exceptions that they have been constitutionally mandated to do, they won't do, like border immigration security. Hello? The truth is, and this guy, by the way, Robert Stavins, the Harvard professor who's exposing this, he's not the only one who's come out here as a whistleblower and said, this is all a sham. It's all a hoax. Anyone who does, by the way, I mean, we've heard politicians actually come right out and say, if you're a climate change denier, there's no room for you in the room. The truth is, ladies and gentlemen, all of this is intended to institute the carbon credit trading schemes that will bilk the entire globe, but most immediately, those nations that actually have some money to bilk. That whole concept is to bilk these countries and milk them dry of resources. That's it. You know, for those of you who have forgotten the carbon trading scheme they were trying to do, which was going to be like a Wall Street trading floor, where companies who produced energy would have to buy carbon credits from another company that didn't have a high carbon footprint, and they'd be given credits. Then those companies that produced toxic fumes or whatever could buy those credits from somebody else. I mean, talk about a sham. You're selling air, smoke, and mirrors. And guess where all of that comes back down to? You, the end consumer. Electricity prices in this nation are skyrocketing, and they're skyrocketing for a very clear and specific reason. The whole idea is to force Western culture and Western-based nations into bankruptcy, into the complete loss of everything that they have to be able to fight back against this global tyranny. You can't fight back if you don't have resources, ladies and gentlemen. And nothing in the country is as it seems. Nothing. You know, there's an article out, and I'm going to talk about this tomorrow. But I just want to point it out today because it ties to this. There were more than a dozen federal appeals court judges who violated federal conflict of interest laws in the past 3 years alone. Now, these are judges that sit on a 3-judge panel. And their conflict of interest is that they hold stock in corporations that they were ruling on in a decision. I mean, you've got to be kidding me. How is there any semblance of justice left when we get to the point where your judges are holding stock in a company that is before them in a case that will determine whether they win or lose, and win or lose big in a new product going to market, some vast amount of money, some kind of a fine? You're kidding me. That's like sitting there and saying, well, this judge can rule over a case involving his own family. Of course he cannot. Everything, ladies and gentlemen, about our justice system, everything about our political system, everything about our executive offices, everything about our legislature, everything about our media, it's all a sham. And the truth is, every one of them are working in concert and as a cohesive unit to mislead you, misdirect you, misinform you, laden with disinformation. You cannot find any source for media today. Alternative is the only place you're going to find it that is going to actually tell you the truth. Where are these articles in the mainstream media? Why is it that Breitbart talks about stuff like that, but none of the mainstream media does? You know, there's plenty of groups out there that would like to call themselves, alternative media. I'm referring to an article I saw about Daily Caller supporting and promoting Common Core. What? Daily Caller is hardly alternative media, ladies and gentlemen. It doesn't get more establishment than Daily Caller. The truth is, the climate change hoax has been shoved down our throats. The EPA is using it as their weapon to dismantle our energy production facilities in this country, whether that be for electricity, whether that be natural gas, or whether that be oil. The climate change deniers are being ostracized and forced out. The climate change, the acolytes and the priests of the religion of climate change are dominating every federal agency. I mean, Immigration and Border Patrol have whole segments dedicated to climate change. For what? I mean, what has that got to do with people who come across the border? Absolutely nothing. It's all a sham. And all of these resources are being directed towards it, and all of these resources are being misused. I mean, these are resources which, frankly, they should be husbanding, and they're not. There's a great article on human events by John Hayward in which he says, when the latest United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report was released last week, I noted that the widely publicized executive summary provided lawmakers was considerably more alarmist than the report itself. Actually, there are 3 layers of alarmism in this smelly little onion of hype, because global warming cultists and their media allies portray the executive summary as even more high-strung than it actually is. They also don't like to mention how often speculative phrases like could and might appear throughout the report. You see, these people are not above lying to gain their ultimate goal. And the primary premise behind all of this is your total and ultimate control. They want to control you, your money, and everything about you. And climate change is a way in which government can do that through policy, not rule of law. Because it's all subjective, not objective. And if they can fraudulently manufacture some commissioned science, all the easier. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to tackle our third topic this morning, which is the IRS activates an enemy list. Now, I want you to understand how important this is, because this, ladies and gentlemen, is the new chapter in tyranny. Now, it's not just the idea that enemy lists might actually exist. It's actually seeing them being utilized. In other words, this is the equivalent of someone who owns a gun, but uses it. Big difference. It's the equivalent between having a gun at the burglary and shooting someone at the burglary. We're going to take a break. I'm going to do some quick local commercials for our radio. We'll be right back on our video stream. You're listening to America's Voice Now. You can communicate with me directly at mike@americasvoicenow.org. Hang on, we'll be right back. If you have an opportunity, please make sure that you visit and support and patronize our sponsors. These are the folks that keep the program on the air every day for you. Please make sure that you visit our friends at the Battery Station. You can go to their website at batterystation.com. You can also call them at 417-257-7799, and they ship nationwide. They have the broadest select. They have every battery that you can imagine. The only thing they don't do is watch batteries, by the way. But they have every other battery you can imagine. They have flashlights. They have all kinds of electronic gear. They have anything and everything that you could need to create a bug-out bag or a camping gear or survival bag or whatever it is that you're interested in. They have freeze-dried food. They have ammunition. There's almost nothing that they don't have. Anybody can walk into that store and be stunned and blown away. Visit them on the web at batterystation.com or call them at 417-257-7799. They're located on the main drag in West Plains going up to the square on Washington Avenue at 303 Washington Avenue, West Plains. Make sure that you visit our friends over at Pizza Hut on Porter Wagoner Boulevard. That's a specific restaurant that supports and patronizes this program. And make sure that you visit them and let them know. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, they have reduced lunch prices. And on Tuesday evening, they have kids under 12 eat free on family night. Make sure that you swing in there and visit with those folks, because I got to tell you, that's a great place. You can go get yourself an awesome lunch. They've got a salad bar there, and then they've also got, a pizza bar and so forth. Make sure you visit Jason Henry if you have a legal challenge going on in your life. Jason Henry is an attorney on the square in West Plains. You can reach him at 417-256-4100, and he handles criminal and civil cases, both in the state criminal system as well as the federal system. Specializes in firearms law, in fact, and you have an opportunity to work with him on issues, general civil issues like divorces and child custody and things like that. He also handles local criminal issues like DUIs and drug charges and stuff like that. So if you have an opportunity to need an attorney, here's your chance to contact one at 417-256-4100. You will not go wrong with him. Make sure that you visit our friends at Patriot Cigar and Tobacco Shop. They're on the square in West Plains at 417-257-1776, and they ship cigars and tobacco and pipes and all kinds of accessories nationwide. Last but not least, make sure you visit my friend Jason over at Wits End Classic Barbershop. You can get a hold of him at 417-372-2027 if you have a question about their hours of operation. And make sure that you swing in there. You can get a great haircut for $10, folks. Where can you beat that, right? So, okay, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. You're listening to America's Voice Now.
restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
All right. Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans, and I am the host here this morning. We cover a four-topic spread every morning. You're catching us in the middle of our show, and so you're catching us on the third segment. I would encourage you to do a couple of things. First and foremost, if there's an opportunity for you to join our friends over at Patriot FB, please make sure that you do that. Patriot FB is a kind of a clone of Facebook, and yet it's all patriots, and there's no trolls and there's no censorship. So it gives you an opportunity to meet with a couple thousand other people that have similar views and opinions to you. And in addition to that, you'll find tons of great information there by people who post up stories and articles that are of interest to you. In addition to that, they stream and carry America's Voice Now. And it's not just a great site because of that. I'm also a member there, and I post stories and articles up there every day. So you can use it as kind of a centralized source for news and information as well. They are also hosting other radio programs, including J.J. McCartney's program at 2 o'clock, the J.J. McCartney Show. Now, J.J. is a great radio guy. He's been doing it for 30 years, a true professional. You will not be disappointed with him. And you have an opportunity to listen to his program as well as Resurrect the Republic with Tom Lacavara. Now, Tom, by the way, is out there right now at the Bundy Ranch, and he has been, I think, all this week. And so I encourage you to hear his program from 10 to 11. He comes on right after me. And the way for you to get there is to just visit patriotfb.com and sign up there. There's another website that's similar to that, but different in many ways, and that is Constitution Club. So I encourage you to go to constitutionclub.ning.com. Now, that's run by a guy I know who has created a unique atmosphere there in the sense that there are about 3,200 counties or 3,400 counties in the United States. He has created an individual website for each county in the country. And so you can join other people within your county, and you know you may not even know some of them existed until you jump on there. And if you join there and there's no one there, then start bringing your friends in there, and you guys have a perfect way to be community organized, if you will, right? So the Constitution Club has a bunch of other radio programs that they promote over there as well. They have all kinds of cool information, and they stand strongly for the principles of the restoration of our republic through constitutional restoration. And so I encourage you to visit those sites and make sure that you are, working with those guys. There's also a friend of mine who runs a website over there called Survival by Preparedness. And if you have an opportunity, you can go visit his website, survivalbypreparedness.com. And Mountain View Off-Grid Living. So there's a lot of guys and girls that run different businesses that are members of Patriot FB or Constitution Club. And so let's make sure that we're keeping our money in our own circle of influence as well, right? I mean, that's a good idea because it enables, one, our business partners to grow their business, while at the same point in time, it enables us to get the products and services that we need. So make sure that you do that. If you have an opportunity, by the way, I'd like you to visit Atlas Survival Shelters. If you are a person, I saw an article the other day about how some of these, the super rich are buying these ultra-luxury doomsday bunkers and things like that, where they're building in-ground swimming pools and, saunas and hot tubs in a bunker. I mean, a little ridiculous. But there's a guy who I know that runs Atlas Survival Shelters, and I got to tell you, he builds these ones that are in these steel tubes, and they're buriable, and they're not luxury by any stretch of the imagination, but they will certainly keep your family and you members of your community. If there's ways you can build them in community clusters, or you can just bury one on a piece of property you have. The upshot is that you will not be disappointed with what he has. It's called AtlasSurvivalShelters.com, and you can visit over there. Jump onto his Facebook page as well, which is under Atlas Survival Shelters, and hit the like button as well. All right. Our topic for this segment is the IRS has activated an enemies list. And what's important about that is that it's not just a question now of us suspecting that, the IRS has been intending to utilize the list of these organizations like 501c4s and TeaParty groups as an enemies list. We now know that they've actually begun using it, and so they're firing the weapon, not just carrying it. Here's the analogy to this. If you were in a place where you saw someone who you knew to be potentially a risk to the community, and you saw someone like that who was carrying a gun, you would say, there's a risk that's even a greater risk now because he's got an arm or a weapon, which makes him potentially even more dangerous. But when that individual has that weapon loaded and begins to use it, now your greatest fears are confirmed. I'm going to analogize this for a moment to what the federal government does to us. It says that you cannot own a weapon because there's the potential out there for you to be dangerous. In fact, it says all felons, irregardless of whether or not they're violent or nonviolent in their crime, are barred from owning a weapon because they're potentially dangerous. Well, I'm going to sit here and tell you that we've seen the actual verifiable proof. Every one of these federal agencies is potentially dangerous with overreach. But in this case, this one's actually firing the weapon. And guess what? The mainstream media, crickets. They went down the other day, and I talked about this on our radio program the other day, but I'm not hearing anybody in mainstream media talking about it. They went and shut down and pulled the 501c3 tax-exempt status for the Patrick Henry Center for Individual Liberty. They pulled their status. And they pulled their status based on their free speech. Here's the difference, ladies and gentlemen. This proves beyond a reasonable doubt that the IRS is actively targeting political enemies of this administration. Because the two things that they used as claims for pulling their tax-free status was comments they made about two people, Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. Hello? One's currently in power, and the other one is the heir apparent. This is a power play that if it's allowed to move on and no one pays any attention to it, it will inflame these ideologues in a way like giving a hardcore alcoholic a fifth of gin and watching him chug the entire thing. They already feel free to go after conservatives. We've seen that with the IRS's actions in barring certain groups from gaining access to the 501c4. We saw that in the exposés of all of the emails that clearly state what their intention was. And even after all of that, when they actually take the gun that everybody was pointing to and saying, hey, are you sure we should allow that dangerous entity to hold that gun? They fired the gun in public into a crowd, and nobody said a word. To me, ladies and gentlemen, it is the height of hypocrisy and arrogance for the government to say, you can't own a dangerous weapon because you have the possibility to become a domestic terrorist. That you, if you go out there and buy MREs or flashlight batteries, are a domestic terrorist. If you support Cliven Bundy and argue against the BLM's unconscionable theft, that you're a domestic terrorist. But when it comes to the IRS, they can operate with impunity and immunity. They can destroy any organization or group they want. They can use the IRS. They can use the ATF, as we watch them do against Catherine, shucks, I can't think of her last name, Engelbrecht. True the vote. I mean, the woman got audited suddenly. She had visits from the ATF. She got visits from the FBI. So, I mean, all the weapons were brought to bear. And the media, for all intents and purposes, was silent until Congress forced a hearing on it and exposed it. And even then, no one is saying, hey, everybody in the IRS needs to be removed. Well, we have to wait and see what the investigation exposes. The investigation is exposed all kinds of things, and nobody's doing anything. So now, because they've been operating with immunity and impunity, now they've taken it a step further. Now they're actually assassinating people on the street, and everybody's going like this. Oh, I didn't see that. I didn't see that. I didn't see that. See, in this case, there's some differentiating factors that make this the Patrick Henry Center unique. One, when you talk about the TeaParty groups like Albrecht's organization and all the others that went to the IRS to obtain their 501c4 status, they approached the IRS. In this case, the Patrick Henry Center was targeted. The IRS lined them up in their sights, took careful aim with a sniper's crosshair, and pulled the trigger. They also did the one thing that they knew that they could do that was that would injure the organization and that was virtually impossible for them to fight back against. And that was they disallowed their tax-exempt contributions, which they knew would starve them to death. By the way, for those of you who have heard me say over and over and over again, we have to starve the beast, maybe the federal government is listening to me more than we are, those of you in the audience, because they're apparently very cognizant of the value of starving your enemy to death. Believes in liberty and freedom. The enemy to them is anybody who is against their overreach, their policies, their unconstitutionality. For the record, by the way, the Patrick Henry Center has been up since and up and operational since the 1990s. I mean, this isn't an organization that sprang out of nowhere. And it was approved back in 1998 as a 501c3, but they've been in existence even since the mid-90s. It was founded by a former FBI agent and a best-selling author, a guy by the name of Gary Aldrich. And he's been a very, very harsh critic of both the Clintons and the Obamas. Now, the IRS has really, in this case, stepped over the boundaries of enforcement because they've really gone out of their way to find someone that they can make an example of. And, this is exactly the way that tyrants always work. Find one person who you can use as a prime candidate and a prime example, someone who apparently has some stature in the community, someone who's outspoken, someone who's looked at and respected, and hang them from the nearest tree in front of everybody in town. And they'll all get the message. See, the truth is, everything that they went after the Patrick Henry Center is a duplication of what's going on by every one of their left-leaning liberal groups, except they're not against the Clintons and the Obamas. The truth is that what we're seeing here, and in this case, you have to recognize what this is. This is very specifically a methodology which, this is terrorism. It is government terrorism, government-sponsored domestic terrorism, utilizing a federal agency as the mercenary soldier for hire. Why is it that America, specifically the mainstream media, but also run-of-the-mill Americans, are not outraged? Everyone fears the IRS. But it's okay for them to abuse the law as long as they're against one of your political enemies. Is that what you're trying to tell me? What are the liberal progressives going to say if ever there's a Republican administration? Not that that's likely ever in the future, by the way, but let's just play along with the utopian fantasy for a moment and say that we actually got a Republican administration. Okay? And that's not my fantasy, I might add, because the truth of the matter is the Republicans don't represent us any more than the Democrats do. But suddenly you start seeing a democratic organization like George Soros or one of their, the Southern Poverty Law Center or one of their groups suddenly being targeted by a Republican administration that controls the IRS. Are all of you on the progressive liberal side of things going to say, well, what's good for the goose is good for the gander? I doubt it. You see, the truth is, actually, if you really want to look at this from the right perspective, there shouldn't be any 501c anythings. 3s, 4s, or otherwise. No one should have preferential access to politicians. That's why the entire country is awash in corruption and greed and money manipulating the political game. I gave you guys news the other day on an article from Princeton and Northwestern that says the United States is no longer a republic. It's now an oligarchy. And Princeton and Northwestern are bastions of the political progressive left. And they came out and said they've reviewed thousands upon thousands of policy changes, and it is clear, beyond a reasonable doubt, that the United States of America is now a corporatocracy. You know why? Money. Their study actually says, and I'm going to read this to you because you need to hear it, that reality is best captured by mixed theories in which both individual economic elites and organized interest groups, including corporations largely owned and controlled by wealthy elites, play a substantial part in affecting public policy. But the general public has little or no independent influence. We believe that if policymaking is dominated by powerful business organizations and a small number of affluent Americans, that America's claim to being a democratic society are seriously threatened. The truth is, they're stating very clearly, very emphatically, very pointedly, the central point that emerges from our research is that economic elites and organized groups representing business interests have substantial independent impact on U.S. government policy, while mass-based interest groups and average citizens have little or no independent influence. Let me explain to you what a 501 anything group is. A special interest. Business interests. How do we know? Because we see them use these organizations as a front. Even churches should not be 501c3. You know why? Because it's being used as a means of corrupting your clergy. The truth is, what we really need to have is we need to have a tax reform in this country that eliminates the IRS altogether, because either taxes are paid on what you purchase or taxes are paid on some other manner, some fair tax variation or something along those lines. But the truth is that what we now have is a plutocracy that is geared and designed to accomplish one thing, and that is the success of one small group or a tightly knit group or organization of oligarchs at the expense of all the rest of us. And the IRS is just, that's the attack dog, the weapon, the mercenary of this administration to accomplish its ideological and political goals. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is not what this country is founded upon, and that is an act that can be construed as treason, because you are aiding and abetting the enemies of a Republican form of government, and you are utilizing and abusing the power of a federal agency to conduct domestic terrorism against the citizens of that country. And there is no other way you can justify it. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. You can communicate with me directly. You can send me email to comment on this or any other article that we or topic that we talk about. You can contact me at mike@americasvoicenow.org. That's mike@americasvoicenow.org. If you can support this effort in any way, please visit our website. We've got a donation button there on PayPal. If you can't get it through PayPal, you can always mail it to us. America's Voice Now, P.O. Box 1195, West Plains, Missouri, 65775. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. There are a group of TeaParty organizations that have some explaining to do about how they're spending the donations. We'll be right back.
I don't want him in the family.
The more people we have, the more we save.
All right. We're back, and you're listening to America's Voice Now. The IRS is bad enough when they're activating enemies and they are acting as a mercenary, destroying the fabric of this country. They are being used as a mercenary with a deadly weapon to destroy America from the inside out. But to make things even worse, there are some groups within the United States who are TeaParty organizations that use the 501c4 functionality that the administration promotes, and they are actually misusing some of these they're not spending the money that they're receiving, which is not tax deductible, by the way. Most of these are 501c4s. And the difference, by the way, is that a 501c4 is not tax deductible, but they don't have to tell you who their donors are. But let's be candid. The two Tea Party organizations that are referenced in this article, and this is from the Daily Caller, so this is not by any means to be construed or taken as a condemnation of all of the Tea Party, those individuals who support the Tea Party, and myself included, and nor is it intended to be a blanket statement about Tea Party people or the organizations in general. There are two that are referenced in this article. And I got to tell you, the numbers on one of them is, and we're going to talk about which ones are which. When we're talking about an organization that is expending an enormous amount of money and they're receiving a lot of money in donations from individuals, but the money is not going where it's supposed to go, that's a problem. And you can't justify that with any kind of explanation that they're offering. At least, and I'm open to hearing what they have to say. And I've got a letter here, which I just got from Tea Party Patriots this morning, in fact, who's arguing the position on the other side. So we're going to be fair, and we're going to be balanced, and we're going to utilize our critical thinking skills and objectivity to determine what, and this will play out a little as we go forward, because this is breaking this morning. But here's the deal. The articles from the Daily Caller, which is, no one should make the mistake of thinking the Daily Caller is a true alternative media source. Don't. It's not. But the article is clear. And they've got a lot of statistical numbers to back it up. Two well-known Tea Party groups spent more than 80% of the money they raised in 2013, but not on the causes and the candidates that they saw it as their mission to support, but on operating expenditures. They paid a lot of consultants, they paid a lot of companies, and they produced a lot of mailing materials, and they rented a lot of mailing lists. Now, the numbers are pretty high. And they're referencing two of them specifically here. There's the new Tea Party Patriots Citizens Fund, which is an independent expenditure arm of the Tea Party Express, and the Our Country Deserves Better PAC. And basically, these organizations spent a significant chunk of the money that they took in on non-political campaigns. In other words, most of the money that they're taking in is going right back out again in fundraising. So it says, so far, no money has been spent to support these candidates. The mission of the PAC will be the PAC's mission, by the way, when we talk about the Tea Party Patriot Citizens Fund, has been raising money since early last year. And the goal of their PAC, they say, is to be a community organizing for conservatives that will help provide activists with resources to organize friends, neighbors, and communities around a freedom agenda in an effort to put people in office who will be true representatives of the people. Okay? The mission of the PAC will be to support good citizen candidates to run for public office and represents the views of the majority of Americans on all levels of government. But so far, they have filed the year-end spending report that they filed with the Federal Election Commission of the $6,405,000 that the company has raised since early last year. $5,335,000 of it has been spent, and all of it was put towards operating expenses. Hello? Now, the vast majority of this came from individuals because the Tea Party is, for all intents and purposes, made up of just plain Jane Joes and Janes, right? That's us. The small folks who don't have a lobby group that's out there lobbying for our interests. I mean, you know, the aerospace industry has one, the senior citizens have one, the banana companies have one, horseshoe manufacturers have a lobbyist, for crimini's sake. But nobody's lobbying for just average Americans. And so these Tea Party groups contend that they are. And the vast majority of these donations came from donors who were individuals, under $200. they reported that out of the 6.4 million, 4.7 of that was unitemized donations under the $200 mark. That's the vast majority, ladies and gentlemen. Now, here's the problem. If they're spending, strategic fundraising, a Minnesota-based company that specializes in fundraising, was paid $1,028,000 for list rentals. I got a problem with that. Because what that tells me is, do you ever get that phone call that says, and usually the guy's got a heavy New York accent. He says, "Hey, I'm calling for the PBA over here. We're trying to raise money for police officers who have been injured in the line of duty. And you know what? They're a fundraising group. It's never the actual PBA itself. And they keep up to 75% of the donations that are made. Never donate to groups like that. Ever. And frankly, I don't donate to anybody until I can see their numbers. And I got to tell you, if I found out that it's somebody I'm donating to is spending 80% of the money that I'm donating, going back out and trying to raise more money, we generally have nothing further to talk about. They spent $892,000 on printing and mailing. And they spent another $647,000 for direct mail, fundraising, consulting, media production, postage, and transaction fees. Now, look, I understand that these groups have to get out there to the public. And I understand that they're trying to raise awareness. But this money isn't being spent on saying, hey, vote for Joe or Bob or Charlie or Cindy or Betty. This money is being spent to say, join us and donate. And one of the guys here, a guy named Martin, was paid $90,000 for his strategic consulting. Here's their response. Here's Martin's response. We were building our supporter base for starting an organization essentially from scratch. So we have to begin building the supporter base for TeaParty Patriot Citizens Fund. And we began doing fundraising and also advertising that we had the TeaParty Patriots Citizens Fund. So far, she said, they have been, quote, building out a national voter database, setting up technology and infrastructure to support their efforts moving forward. Additionally, they've spent money on message testing and polling. Here's the problem. This is beginning to smell an awful lot like a corporate effort, not a group of citizens who are saying, what can we do to take our country back? Now, I'm not going to throw them under the bus based on this report, but I can tell you this. I'm going to be doing some hard looking at whatever other information I can find from these groups, and we're going to try to figure out whether or not. Here's my concern. If the Tea Party group is playing the same games as the Republican and the Democratic parties, then frankly, I've got no use for them. Now, Tea Party Patriots, and there was another one out there, by the way. This is the Our Country Deserves Better PAC that declares itself committed to identifying and supporting conservative candidates and causes that will champion Tea Party values and return our country to the constitutional principles that have made America the shining city on a hill. That sounds great, right? The group allocated its spending in a similar fashion to the Tea Party Patriot Fund. It raised $6 million, the vast majority of which, $4.9 million, came from donors giving amounts smaller than $200. Now, and this group is different, so just stick with the numbers here for a moment. The group spent $5.7 million in total. 5.6 of that, or 98.6 of that, went towards operating expenses, direct mail salaries, and paying strategic consultants. 98.6%? Hello? 55,995 went to independent expenditures. That's generally that which is attributed to candidates. Now, a company called Russo Marsh and Associates received $1.9 million for a variety of functions, including fundraising by mail, telemarketing, advertising, strategic consulting, as well as a number of reimbursements for travel expenses and postage. Amy Kremer, the chairman of the Tea Party Express, got $92,000 for strategic consulting. $421,000 went to a direct mail fundraising firm, HSP Direct, for creative fees. Wow. I mean, I run a small advertising business. What would I do for a $421,000 contract for creative fees? Hello? Now, FreedomWorks. FreedomWorks has been around. They're not new this year, right? FreedomWorks, another group that identifies with the Tea Party, works to organize activists, spent most of their money on overhead in 2013. But hang on a minute, because the year before they did something completely different. So I got to question what's going on here. They raised $850,000 on top of $831,000 they began the year with. They spent $1 million in total, and 87.3 of that went to operating expenses. Okay. 12.4% went to independent expenditures, again, which is attributable to the candidates themselves or candidate elections. But in 2012, when the Tea Party was battling to unseat Democrats in Congress and President Barack Obama, the numbers looked different. FreedomWorks began the year with $1.99 million, $2 million, and they raised $20.8 million over the course of the year. They spent $22 million of that in total. And of that, 93% went to independent expenditures. And operating costs were only $2.5 million. So something's not right here. In 2012, they spent 90-some-odd% on these independent expenditures, which one has to assume they're. And I reserve the right to know how exactly independent expenditures is defined, but 90% of it in 2012 went to independent expenditures, allegedly or assumably candidates, and helping them, move their campaigns when they're starved for cash because the Republican and Democratic parties are, sucking all the money out of the room like a vacuum, right? But this year, when we ought to be trying to move to get every member in the House and the Senate fired and removed, it's the other way around. Has there been a change in leadership? Now, the 2012 election had little impact on Our Country Deserves Better PAC and how they spent their money. They began the year with $115,000 in the bank. They raised $6.5 million. They spent $5.7. Of that, 86% went to operating costs. $250,500 was given to other political committees or candidates, and $539,000 went towards independent expenditures. Here's my problem. The response is, we're not Club for Growth, he says Budowich, who's the Taylor Budowich, the executive director for Tea Party Express. He says the group is focused on organizing and educating voters, not spending money to help candidates. Okay, but I got to tell you, organizing and educating voters, the administrative costs can't be 86%. There's something wrong with that. I got this email this morning from Tea Party Patriots. I'm going to read it to you because it's important, because it relates to this, and I want to be fair. Since the Tea Party movement began 5 years ago, we've been under attack by the media, declared dead over and over again, and criticized by congressional leadership from people like Mitch McConnell and John Boehner, whom we thought we would welcome our spirited work to help get our fiscal house in order. Yet, just as we are building for the 2014 elections, we see more and more scrutiny and more attempts to delegitimize the hard work of Tea Party members all over the country. Such was the case in a news story by the Washington Post on Sunday. We shouldn't be surprised that the GOP establishment and the liberal media are coordinating their attacks against leading Tea Party organizations and their leaders. In fact, look for another similar attack coming very soon from others. That tells me that something else is coming out here. These news reports, quote unquote, include sensational allegations regarding what might appear to be, to the uninformed, as excessive fundraising costs. Their storyline is that Tea Party Patriots and Tea Party Patriots Citizens Fund spend too much money on fundraising with little left over to actually help drive our issues and help our endorsed candidates. Nothing could be further from the truth. We at Tea Party Patriots use email and direct mail to not only raise small dollar contributions from thousands of people, but also to communicate directly with our members on important issues. The IRS targeting scandal, the national debt, taxes and spending, Obamacare, Benghazi, and immigration reform, to name just a few. These are the same issues the so-called mainstream media either fail to cover at all or cover in ways that distort the truth. In less than 5 years, we've placed over $250 million, that's with a B, email messages, that's their words, not mine. We've placed over $250 million, with a B, email messages directly into the inboxes of conservative Americans. In the mail, we have disseminated over 30.7 million messages into mailboxes of our citizens. Over 1.2 million people have signed online petitions or taken some other activist action from email communications, and over 600,000 have signed hard copy petitions or taken some other step in activism related to our principles. Since October, we have generated over 3 million calls into congressional offices supporting our issues. Each week, through our communication efforts in snail mail, email, radio advertising, social media, and through the dedicated efforts of individual patriotic Americans, we spread the message to local volunteer networks, and we reach over 20 million Americans with our vision for the country's future. A nation where personal freedom is cherished and where all Americans are treated equally, assuring the ability of all Americans to pursue their American dream. All of the money spent by Tea Party Patriots goes to advance Tea Party principles and issues, and that spent by Tea Party Patriot Citizens Fund helps candidates who support those same principles: personal freedom, economic freedom, and a debt-free future. The media, conveniently and quite possibly deliberately, overlooks a fundamental fact of American politics for the last 50 years: the virtual monopoly of control over the so-called mainstream media enjoyed by our political opponents in both parties. Because we and our allies cannot rely on being able to spread our message through ABC, CBS, NBC, the New York Times, the Washington Post, or scores of other so-called mainstream media outlets, we've been forced to create our own channels of communication so we can speak directly to our supporters and potential supporters without waiting for permission, quote unquote, from the editors of the New York Times. I would agree with that. Consequently, while the Tea Party Patriots is grassroots-based and volunteer-driven, altruism inevitably meets reality. It costs money to operate an organization of this magnitude. When we hire an employee, he or she is paid to work toward our mission. When we travel, it is to work toward our mission. When we lease an office, it is to have a place to work to advance our mission. When we pay for training and tools for volunteers, it's so that we can better accomplish our mission. When we buy supplies, buy equipment, pay contractors, pay lawyers, pay for parking, pay for anything and everything we buy, it is all to accomplish our mission. When we formed the Tea Party Patriots in 2009, and when we started the Citizens Fund in 2013, we knew the mainstream media would oppose us. So now we are not surprised when high-level politicians in the Republican establishment have joined forces with the liberal media to smear us. In fact, it tells us we're doing something right. The establishment sees its hold on power threatened, and the liberal media remains frustrated that they no longer have a monopoly on the flow of information. We expect both to ramp up their attacks in the coming months. The more successful we are, the more vicious the attacks. We're going to keep fighting for personal freedom, economic freedom, and a debt-free future. Smears from the liberal media and GOP establishment will not deter us. We wear them as badges of honor. Okay, that was from the Tea Party Patriots. Now, okay, so here's my concern. And I don't disagree with some of the things that they're saying in this document. But I got to tell you something. I get a mailbox full of stuff like this every day. And I don't read every one. And I don't go and follow every link. And I will say this. Every one of them, and I get them from the Republicans, I get them from the Tea Party, I even get a couple from progressives. Every one of them is laden with demands and requests for money. And most of them are laden with fear that if you don't do this and you don't give us some money, here's what's going to happen. I got a question. This show has been out here for 3 years. And this isn't sour grapes or something. I'm just using myself as an example. We operate not on a shoestring budget, but on less than a shoestring. I hold the show together with rubber bands and spit and tissue and toilet paper. Why aren't you guys out there supporting radio programs like this? Hello? There are actual groups that sent me. I've actually had groups that have sent me an email that said, do you need money for your organization? Well, we have a grant program. One of them was Convention of the States. And I submitted an application to them. And they came back and they said, well, it was to buy equipment, right? And they said, well, we don't support, capital expenditures. And in their document, they said we don't support operating expenditures. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. If you don't have capital expenditure and you don't have operating expenditure, what exactly do you support? Because there's nothing else. I get the feeling, look, here's the point. There are alternative media groups out there that are starving to death. Lots of great radio programs out there, and all of them could use a boost. Why isn't the Tea Party advertising with those programs and giving them some funding that way? And I'll be honest with you, the email and the mail thing, it's called junk mail for a reason, ladies and gentlemen, on both domestic, hard physical snail mail and email. The truth is, you'd be better off, I think, spending the money, not with these people who are going to stand there and wear their $1,000 suits. This is the same crap that's advertised, that's promoting and driving the Republican Party. The same consultants. If you need a consultant to tell you why the Tea Party needs to exist, then perhaps you're in the wrong frame. I've actually had people in these organizations tell me, well, your message is not mainstream enough for the Tea Party. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, the country's coming down around our heads. It's a house of cards that's falling in slow motion as we're standing here. We have a president who is not even an American citizen, who is operating unconstitutionally. We have a federal government that operates so far outside the constitutional boundaries that it's not even a distant memory, hazy memory to them. You have administrative agencies that operate like a mercenary police force or a mercenary military force that are now literally, according to the IRS, shooting. And you got an attorney general who obviously is so far outside the boundaries of the law that everybody he puts in jail he's more guilty than. And you're telling me it's not mainstream enough. That tells me something's wrong with the message. We're going to continue to look into this. I don't want this to be construed by anybody to be a toss against the Tea Party organizations and many of the small ones. But I got to tell you, if we find out that this money is being squandered, I'll go after you just like I'd go after any Republican, just like I'd go after any Democrat, Soros, Boehner, or any of the rest of them. You're not exempt. And I hope for your sake that's not the case. Because it would be a tragedy if this turned out to be more about money than about saving the dog-knob country. Please prove to us otherwise. You've been listening to America's Voice Now. Please make sure that you communicate with us and visit us at our website at americasvoicenow.org. You can also communicate with me directly by sending me email to mike@americasvoicenow.org. Maybe some of you folks who support these Tea Party organizations with donations would be better off to direct them to groups and individuals where you know the money is going to go directly towards their costs and not towards generating more. Just a thought. God bless. Have a great day.